BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Tuesday. It is time for some True Crime Talk Radio. Welcome to the show. I am your host, DEHAN, and in this episode, we have some lighter things to discuss, as well as some darker material, but I thought we could begin with the lighter subject first. But before the episode truly begins, I would like to remind you guys that I am also the host of AstroPsych 400, a different YouTube channel. And some people were saying that they use this program, BlackBoxOnlineRadio, as a way to fall asleep at night, and I thought, why not create something that is specifically customized to help people fall asleep? And you can find that, the podcast for sleep, on AstroPsych 400, as well as some other videos about psychology, some of the older ones, even talking about astrology and personality traits, if you're into that. One more time, AstroPsych 400. And a great way to support both channels is to go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse by me, DEHAN. It is a novel murder mystery inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the Teespring page. Feel free to have a look at some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. So I am now finally coming to you from West Virginia once again. I was actually spending the last 5 weeks in the state of Nevada, and I flew back yesterday. And while I was on the plane, I was listening to an episode of Planet X Filmworks where the host Ross interviewed Mark Hewitt, author of Hunted, Profiled, and Exposed, 3 books about the Zodiac Killer, and he was talking all about the Zodiac Unabomber connection, and I said that Killer on a White Horse, my own novel, was inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection. There's also a Zodiac Unabomber connection, as well as the Golden State Killer connection, the Anthrax Killer connection, many different theories involving the Zodiac Killer, but the Zodiac Unabomber connection, once again promoted heavily by Mark Hewitt, he is a supporter of that theory, is one that I've had the opportunity to discuss with Mark on not only this channel, Black Box Online Radio, but also on the Zodiac Killer channel's Interviews with the Expert series. I hope you will check out Ross's interview with Mark Hewitt, and it was definitely very good, but they began discussing something that I had not heard of prior to that interview, and that is that there is a new Unabomber film coming out soon called Ted K, named for Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, whom some people think is also the Zodiac Killer, and some people think that Ted Kaczynski was involved with other crimes as well. There's a lot of interconnectivity in the true crime world. And Ross also shared one thing that I was also unaware of, is that there is another movie about the Unabomber called simply The Unabomber that is available on YouTube for free, and I'm definitely going to be watching that tonight after the conclusion of this episode. But to talk about the newer movie that is going to be coming out, I'm going to go to an article from Collider.com that says Ted K trailer gives a glimpse into the mind of one of America's most dangerous domestic terrorists. Ted K is the crime documentary covering the Unabomber from director Tony Stone. Crime documentary, I don't know, everything in there looked like it was dramatic recreations, and they received a new trailer and a poster ahead of its nationwide theatrical and on-demand release. The film aims to examine the twisted mind of Ted Kaczynski as his paranoid beliefs turned to violent rage, and modern society increasingly disturbed him, and he went into his secluded home into the mountains. And Kaczynski is going to be played by Sharlto Coppla. I'm not even familiar with this actor, but he was from District 9, something else that I did not see. I got to catch up on my movie watching, but I definitely have this type of fascination with not only crime dramas, but I've said this many times. Somebody needs to start a podcast where they compare the true story, like the documentaries, the nonfiction sources, to a movie. Like, say, for example, if you already have this movie out called The Unabomber, talk about the real story of Ted Kaczynski, and then how is it portrayed on film, a compare and contrast, even if it's not me who starts it. I think that that would be a very entertaining show. And in addition to this film, talking about some of Ted Kaczynski's bizarre beliefs, Ted K's trailer progresses gradually as we first see Kaczynski react to how modern society is harming the land around him and the world at large. And this is why you have to hear the interviews with Mark Hewitt, again on the Zodiac Killer channel, as well as Planet X Filmworks, because he challenges a lot of these things that Ted Kaczynski was an environmentalist. No, not really. He is someone who was a poacher and he abused animals. It's more of a facade, or it's something that connects with people in a way to just kind of make some noise to draw a crowd, so to speak. And those are my words, not Mark Hewitt's. But we also have to remember that these types of beliefs were very popular back in the 1960s when Ted Kaczynski was truly rising into his own. And during the 1960s, Ted Kaczynski was at Berkeley, California. And I misspoke once in an episode when I was talking about some mind control experiments that Ted Kaczynski participated in when he was at Harvard University, which were funded by the OSS. Those were not in the 1960s. I believe that began in 1958. But in the 1960s, we also have the Manson family. And the Manson family had this whole sort of environmental facade as well. And some of the Manson followers were even talking about the concept of Atwa, and some people were even saying that their religion was Atwa, air, trees, water, animals, if I've remembered correctly. I guess it could be animals, trees, water, animals, A and A. You could move those around interchangeably if you so choose, but people do then turn around and do very destructive things, or they show no regard for the environment, so you have to figure out what is truly happening. But this film, Ted K, documents his vendettas against oil companies, logging outfits, and the corruption of society through technology in his writings as he plans to take revenge on the world for disturbing his peace. Through chilling narration, courtesy of Copley, and terrifying visuals that show the Unabomber at work, making bombs and torching equipment, the trailer gets the point across that Kaczynski believes that violence is an effective and righteous method of protest and expression of belief. That very sentiment echoes through the trailer's final line, "My motive, I want to change the world." And you definitely have to wonder about people who are doing very destructive things, and in the name of peace. You really have to wonder, especially when it's done on the level of the individual. I'm going to burn down this building because I don't want it to take up space for the forest. Or you want to live in a world with less destruction, so you're going to create more destruction. I have never been a fan of that type of thinking, and I was recording an episode about this for BlackBoxOnlineRadio when I was first starting this channel, and I was going on this passionate, driven rant about, if you want peace on Earth, don't go run around setting things on fire, and I'm just getting all hyped up, and I'm practically shouting, and I was so intense that my recorder melted. It actually melted during the recording. Okay, it had nothing to do with me, but no, I mean, that did actually happen, though. The recorder got so hot and it melted. That was just a coincidence. But I was like, oh, now the world will never hear all my calls to get people to stop domestic terrorism. Sorry, maybe someday in the future, though. But on the notion of how a lot of people try to connect another serial killer to the Zodiac Killer mystery, Ross and Mark Hewitt were talking about a previous book that was written by Douglas Oswell, talking about the Zodiac and the Unabomber, and there's even this allegation that a lot of the material that Mark Hewitt uses originally came from Douglas Oswell, but I think that there's something that is so much more important, and we need to address this with any true crime case. More than one person can agree on a theory. More than one person can agree on an observation. Like, say, for example, you. No matter who you are, if you propose a solution to the Zodiac Killer's Z32 cipher, and I look at your solution and I say, aha, you've done it. You've cracked the Z32 cipher, and I agree with you. It doesn't mean that I solved it. It doesn't mean that I was the first one. It just means that that is the solution that I think is correct. And more than one person can promote a suspect. So if there's a person A who's talking about this book that says that Ted Kaczynski was the Unabomber and the Zodiac Killer, and then person B also has a book out saying Ted Kaczynski was the Unabomber and the Zodiac Killer, then, all right, you both have an agreement on a suspect, and then there are some additional observations. And when I asked Mark Hewitt this direct question, what's the difference between your writings and Douglas Oswell's writings? And he said that Oswell's book was mostly about documenting the similarities between the Zodiac Killer and the Unabomber. And then Mark Hewitt's books, Hunted, Profiled, Exposed, particularly the book Exposed, revealed that he thought that Ted Kaczynski was indeed the Zodiac Killer in addition to the Unabomber. But there are many people out there who are also thinking that there are serial killers, like we said, the Golden State Killer was also the Zodiac. That is the subject of the writings of Ann Penn. She is the author of Serial Slaughter, as well as What If, Golden State Killer, Zodiac Solved. And we had a comment come in recently on an episode from Daniel Webster, who said that a photo that I posted of Bruce Ivins, the anthrax killer, heavily resembles the Zodiac Killer composite sketch from the 1960s, and it's a photo of Bruce Ivins around a similar time frame. I believe Ivins would have been in his early 20s in the late 1960s at the time of the Zodiac crimes, and Daniel Webster said that he resembles the composite sketch. Someone is going to try to connect him to the Zodiac Killer mystery. And yes, indeed, that is something that is happening. And all of those observations on what we were calling Zodianthrax, the Zodianthrax connection, those are all created by Tyler Grover, and I've talked about that in several episodes. And last week on the Anything Goes segment, I did a response to the book The Mirage Man by David Willman, talking about the anthrax killer, and we aren't 100% sure, but it seems highly likely that Bruce Ivins was indeed the anthrax killer. And if you would like to see a dramatic recreation of this, I recommend the program The Hot Zone Anthrax. And it's a 6-part miniseries that was put out on Nat Geo. It's available on Hulu. And it not only documents the investigation into the anthrax killer mystery, the first 3 episodes really focus on that, showing the FBI trying to catch the anthrax killer. And the second set of episodes, the final 3 episodes in the miniseries, are showing the descent into madness by this individual, Bruce Ivins, who was the prime suspect. And no matter what, Bruce Ivins was dealing with some very intense mental instability, and he ended up committing suicide by overdosing on Tylenol. And you can see how that put out on film in the Hot Zone Anthrax, as well as hearing no less than 3 episodes on BlackBoxOnlineRadio. And I know that that's not a very popular case. I mean, I can see what you guys are listening to, and I can see how you're responding to content, but I just wanted to learn more about the anthrax killer. I think it is an absolutely fascinating mystery, and it's part of the true crime world. And I'm always trying to look for new cases to explore, because I think that there's something that we can learn from all of these stories, and whether it's the human brain and how people are functioning, or just what is the answer to the mystery, who actually committed these crimes, what was their motivation for committing these crimes, why did they do what they do, all of that. So I will definitely be doing some more stories like that on the channel. And I did say that there was some darker material that I wanted to get into in this episode, and that is to talk about a serial killer that I've never mentioned before on Black Box Online Radio. On Monday, for the Zodiac Monday segment, I did an episode about the suspect McDuff, and when I first learned about him, people were really trying to differentiate him from a different serial killer named Kenneth McDuff. Now, it's important to note that McDuff, the Zodiac suspect, was never convicted of anything like murder, but there is a convicted serial killer out there that has a similar name, and his name is Kenneth McDuff, who did operate in a similar part of the country, or a nearby part of the country. And I would like to go over to the website crimemuseum.org that is going to help us out with an introduction to Kenneth McDuff. Kenneth McDuff was an American serial killer suspected of at least 14 murders and served time on death row from 1968 to 1972, and again in the 1990s. That will be the very important thing to remember. He's on death row 68 to 72, but wait, and then again in the 90s? I have so much to share with you guys about that. Born on March 21st of 1946, he was from Central Texas and had 3 siblings. McDuff's mother, Addie McDuff, was a well-known woman around her area, and they called her the pistol-packin' mama because of her habit of carrying a firearm and her violent tendencies. Well, that's going to lead to a whole set of mental instability issues for her kids. McDuff was known to shoot his .22 rifle at living creatures and was often getting into fights with older boys. With these tendencies, he was well known by the sheriff of his hometown. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely... The escalation of violent tendencies is also very normal with serial killers. Before his murder convictions, he was convicted of 12 counts of burglary and attempted burglary. He was then sentenced to 12 4-year prison terms, served concurrently. However, he was paroled in December of 1965. People always ask this question when it comes up, like, how is somebody able to get 12 4-year terms, but then they're only serving 4 years in prison and then paroled? There is concurrent and then consecutive. If it's consecutive, then it's like 4 years, and then they have to serve another 4 years and another 4 years, but you can serve things concurrently, and then you can get out earlier. On the night of the first murders, McDuff and his newfound friend Roydale Green were driving across Central Texas when they came across a car parked near a baseball diamond. Inside the parked car were 2 men and women, Robert Brandt and Edna Louise, and his cousin Marcus Dunham. The 2 men approached the vehicle and ordered the 3 people into the trunk of both cars. McDuff and Green drove both cars to a remote area where the men were shot in the head. The woman was raped by both men and strangled by McDuff with a broomstick. Absolutely horrible. But yes, Kenneth McDuff went on to become captured because of that, and as a result of the crimes, he was sentenced to death in prison for the murder of Robert Brand particularly. But then what happened was, very famously, California suspended the death penalty or removed the death penalty, and all the sentences were commuted. Even the Manson family members were all sentenced to death, and then their sentences were commuted to life in prison. But then California brought the death penalty back, and the sentences for the Manson family remained as life in prison. They were not sent back to the death row status. But you heard very clearly with Kenneth McDuff, he's then going to go back on to the death row later on. As a result of the suspension of the death penalty in 1972 and overcrowding in Texas prisons, many prisoners were not able to serve out their full sentences. As a result, McDuff was given parole in October of 1989, although never officially connected. Another suspected murder victim of McDuff was Seraphia Parker, whose body was found just 3 days after McDuff's release from prison. Although released on parole, McDuff made no attempt to show he had reformed. He was convicted of making threats and trying to pick fights with others, and even for public drunkenness and DUI. He began drinking heavily and became addicted to crack cocaine. During a roadblock in October of 1991, a woman with her hands behind her back was seen attempting to kick out the windshield of a car and was never seen alive again. She was later identified as a prostitute named Brenda Thompson. Only a few days later, another woman, Regina, also known as Gina Moore, vanished. In December of 1991, McDuff and a close friend, Alva Hank Worley, were driving around looking for drugs. Worley testified that McDuff would point out specific women along the street that he would like to take. That night they saw Colleen Reed, an accountant who was washing her car at a car wash, and McDuff grabbed her and forced her into the car. Both men sexually assaulted her, and although witnesses called the police, they were too late. McDuff dropped Worley off later and disposed of the body. So, you can see this guy is out of control, and it just begs the question, why on earth was he ever given any type of parole at all? I know that people can be deceived, and I know that parole boards aren't meant to be perfect, and they have things like overcrowding in the prison system, but why on earth was this guy ever let out? Why was he given 4 concurrent sentences, or was it 12 4-year sentences concurrently as opposed to consecutive? They could have kept him locked up so many times, they're just always releasing him from prison, and he's going on to commit more and more crimes. It is absolutely sickening. And this is not an isolated incident. This also happens very frequently, and because we learn about true crime cases, we know that this is very typical behavior. And I was talking recently about the serial killer Arthur Bomar, the Stone Cold Killer, on the Thursday segment, and very similar story as well. He committed a murder in the late 1970s of a man named Larry Carrier in California. He took a plea deal, so he was sent to jail for manslaughter, but then once he gets out of jail in Nevada, he goes back to his home state of Pennsylvania. He breaks the conditions of his parole, and then while he's in Pennsylvania, he just starts murdering other people. He starts murdering women. And there was a particular article that I was reading during the Arthur Bomar episode about even though he spent 11 years in prison, he wasn't reformed. Of course not. And it was Stephen Kay, of all people. Stephen Kay, the prosecutor from the Manson family parole hearings, who said that the prison system is not about rehabilitation. It is not about reform. It is about punishment. And absolutely, I do agree with that. And I know Stephen Kay isn't the most likable person, but you have to understand that some people are so dangerous that they should not be reintroduced into society. And this is coming from some guy like me who is almost certainly opposed to the death penalty. But I even have an episode where I was exploring this whole concept about how I used to be pro-death penalty in the past, now I'm mostly against it. But just hearing these stories of people who are acting like Kenneth McDuff, he's in jail for years, and then they're like, well, there's prison overcrowding, and his death sentence was commuted to life in prison. Let's just grant him parole anyway. And so what? He can go out and rape, murder, assault, and abuse other people. Very, very serious crimes. And as I said, he's not an isolated incident. This is happening all the time. Some people are also very traumatized by prison life. They are very much dealing with abusive conditions in prison, and it's just making the situation worse. And sadly, for someone who is so unstable, the answer is not to reintroduce them into society. It would be to keep them locked up. And continuing onward with the article, while working at a quick market, McDuff developed a fascination with his senior manager's wife, Melissa Northrup. On many occasions he mentioned wanting to rob the store and take Melissa. Her husband grew worried and she didn't return home one night following her shift, and an investigation was launched. Eyewitnesses were able to identify McDuff in the area of the abduction, as well as the site where Colleen Reed was kidnapped. The body of Melissa Northrup was discovered. Around the same time, another body was found in the woods. Her name was Valencia K. Joshua, a sex worker who was last seen searching for McDuff's dorm room. At this point, McDuff had fled Texas and obtained a new fake ID. He became a garbage collector. Soon after Melissa Northrup's body was found, he was profiled on America's Most Wanted. Only a couple days later, a coworker contacted the police and told them where to find him. He was pulled over during a garbage stop and became America's Most Wanted's 208th successful capture. During the first trial involving the death of Northrup, he was rude and disruptive. He even tried to represent himself, but could neither provide truthful accounts of the night or the woman he killed. He was sentenced to death for the murder of Melissa Northrup. Following that trial, he was then tried for the murder of Colleen Reed and was disruptive this time around again. Although her body was never found, he was convicted of her killing based on strong circumstantial evidence and eyewitness counts. He was again sentenced to death. Oh yeah, and this whole thing about habeas corpus, you have to know where the body is to convict somebody of a murder. That does not happen. And on these True Crime Talk radio segments, I've even brought this up before. A very clear example is Shantae and Kenny Kimes, the people who were convicted of the murder of Irene Silverman, and their defense was habeas corpus. Like, well, where's her body? If you're saying that we murdered her, how do we even know that she isn't still alive? Nope, they were convicted. And it sounds like the same thing happened to Kenneth McDuff. Following his arrest, Texas began an overhaul to ensure that no other criminals were able to get out on parole if they were like McDuff. Absolutely, I mean, that is definitely what I've been trying to kind of just shout from the rooftops here. And they shouldn't get the right to parole either. They changed the rules to improve monitoring upon release. Collectively, these new rules in Texas began to develop the name the McDuff Laws. Well, that's something. The location of Regina Moore and Brenda Thompson's bodies were provided as his execution date neared. He was even taken out under tight security to provide the location of the remains of Colleen Reed. On November 18, 1998, Kenneth McDuff was put to death by lethal injection in Huntsville. And that is the Huntsville prison. So a big thank you again to Crime Museum. And Kenneth McDuff is known as the Broomstick Killer because, as I said with his first murder victim, he strangled her to death with a broomstick. But you must notice some different types of behavior with serial killers like Arthur Bomar, the Stone Cold Killer, Kenneth McDuff, the Broomstick Killer, and other ones such as the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski and the Anthrax Killer Bruce Ivans, if indeed Ivans did it, which I believe he did. He wasn't convicted of it, though, unlike those other three gentlemen that I just stated. They were convicted of their crimes. With Kenneth McDuff, he is a very rough, crude, abrasive, loudmouth serial killer, confrontational. He is also targeting sex workers, targeting women in vulnerable places. Arthur Bomar, the Stone Cold Killer, did very similar things, except with the Stone Cold Killer, he developed this method of tapping the bumper of her car, like he's driving behind someone on the road, and then very gently he would tap the bumper of her car, and she's going to pull over saying, "Hey, this person hit my car, oh, I better get his insurance information," and then he would attack the woman that way. Whereas with Kenneth McDuff, it seems like he's just driving around and just kind of pointing out the victims that he wants to choose. But it's a shocking question. Why was this guy let out of jail so many times? Why did they keep reintroducing him into society so he could kill people? Like, what on earth is going on? But with Ted Kaczynski and Bruce Ivans, there's a certain sense of intellectualism in their methods. Firstly, the Anthrax Killer is doing what? He's sending letters laced with anthrax, which the average person wouldn't have the ability to do. But even with the Unabomber, the creation of his bombs are also the things that the average person wouldn't be able to do. And I think that Mark Hewitt might be very correct about something when he points out that the Unabomber wasn't about industrial society and its future. He didn't truly care about the environment or think that technology was bad. I mean, maybe he thought man should suffer, but man should do it stoically. So he shouldn't just live in a cabin in the forest and stay away from people. But Ted Kaczynski was known to break out into fits of rage, striking an axe at a neighbor's cabin when no one was around. But what's the commonality among all these four people? The Stone Cold Killer, the Broomstick Killer, the Anthrax Killer, the Unabomber? Power. They wanted power. Is there some type of sexual animosity toward women in all of them? Yeah, absolutely. But it's definitely power. I have said this once and I'll say it again. The trinity of true crime deviance, money, sex, and power. These are the reasons why people commit crimes. It's true. Absolutely. It's true. But which one is the most important? Power. They want to have power over people. And this usually comes from a very faulty relationship with somebody's mother. And there's this type of lack of bonding between parent and child, mother and child even. Bruce Ivans, the Anthrax Killer, experienced a very bad relationship with his mother. And it sounds like Kenneth McDuff also had a very bad relationship with his mother. They were both physically and emotionally abusive, and even perhaps with certain instances with the life of Ted Kaczynski, it's not even so much as, well, I don't want to misstate something. With Ted Kaczynski, he perhaps thought his mother did not keep him safe all the time. So what this leads people to do is they want revenge on not only society, but also women, because all women represent their mother. But there is another article about the serial killer Kenneth McDuff, the Broomstick Killer, and it's from Free to Kill Texas Monthly. That's Free to Kill is the title of the article. Texas Monthly is the publication. And I just see the headline here, but they're asking a question right at the beginning. Kenneth McDuff is one of the most sadistic, vicious murderers that Texas has ever produced. Why did the state parole board put him back on the streets? Well, I think the previous article from Crime Museum laid out some reasons that he was released because of a commuted sentence and then overcrowding. And yes, that happened in other states like California too. So I think that they put him out on the streets for those reasons. It just turned out to be an absolute disaster. Were they wrong to do that? Yes, absolutely. Because this really just goes to show you that sometimes people have destructive tendencies, and they aren't trying to do anything with their life other than release their destructive tendencies onto other people. It could be a bad relationship with their parents, but it's also related to impulse control. They say that most of the people who are in prisons have problems with impulse control, that they get these violent urges that they choose to act on, and sometimes it's very serious mental illnesses. Other times, it's just they feel that they are somewhat superior, or that they are not going to get caught, or they just simply don't care if they get caught. They don't care about the consequences, and they're showing indifference to human life. And this goes from a different trinity to another one, goes from one trinity to another, and that is the dark triad traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. And I'm sure a lot of the serial killers that I just listed in this episode probably experienced something very similar. But it really is a shame that Kenneth Macduff was let out of prison so many times to continue to kill. It's a shame that Arthur Bomar was let out of prison so he could continue to kill. And the big shame with people like the Anthrax Killer and Ted Kaczynski is that someone didn't prevent them earlier, didn't prevent them from doing this type of harm to begin with, or wasn't aware of what was going on. With Kaczynski, was a little bit more concealed, but Bruce Ivans was out in the open displaying his mental instability, and a lot of people didn't respond in the most effective way, or they're just always giving him a pass. And there's even a section about this in The Mirage Man, just Bruce being Bruce. Oh, well, that's just his personality. Nope. It's highly likely that he was a serial killer, and with Bruce Ivans, he went on to commit suicide, so it's a little bit more than just having a different type of personality. Well, anyway, I would love to read your comments down below. What do you think about anything that I've talked about in this episode, whether it's the Unabomber movies, the Zodiac Killer, and some of these serial killers like Kenneth Macduff? I would love to read your comments in the section down below. Write anything that you would like. That is all from me now, and I will see you over on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.